You won't believe what just happened in the world of gospel music. Marvin Winans, the name people respected in churches, award shows, and gospel playlists, suddenly stepped away from it all. A man who had given his entire life to faith, worship, and community just said goodbye. But here's the shocking part. It wasn't just a regular retirement. No, this decision came with whispers, hidden pain, and a truth that only now is beginning to surface. Let me tell you, this is not just about a man leaving his job. It's about a journey that tested his faith, shook his identity, and exposed the silent battles behind the pulpit. Marvin wasn't just a singer, he was a force in the gospel world. He came from the famous Winans family, a family that didn't just sing gospel, they lived it. He helped form the Grammy-winning group The Winans, and their songs like Tomorrow and Ain't No Need to Worry became lifelines for people who were lost, struggling, or broken. His voice carried emotion, depth, and spirit. People didn't just listen to Marvin Winans, they felt him. That's what made this sudden exit so surprising. How could someone so devoted, so successful, just step away? But this is where it gets interesting. Marvin's story didn't stop at music. He took his faith to another level when he founded the Perfecting Church in Detroit. He became a pastor, a leader, a guide for thousands of people who walked into that church every week. For over 30 years, Marvin stood on that stage, delivering sermons, comforting families, praying for healing, and building a spiritual home for his community. Under his leadership, the church grew massively, not just in Detroit, but across states and even countries. His sermons were shared online, his events were packed, and his name was respected everywhere. From gospel stages to church pews, Marvin Winans was untouchable. But even as the world saw a strong leader, something else was happening behind closed doors. Marvin started facing battles that the cameras never captured. Health issues started creeping in, slowly, silently, but steadily. The man who once had the energy to preach, sing, travel, and organize large church events began to feel the weight of his own body working against him. The toll about balancing ministry and music became heavier by the year. There were times when he had to push through pain just to stand and preach, but he never showed it to the world. He smiled, he sang, and he prayed, all while hiding the hurt within. And then came the emotional blows. Marvin faced deep personal losses that tore through his heart. When his brother Ronald Winans passed away in 2005, it wasn't just a loss, it was like losing a part of himself. Ronald wasn't only his brother, he was his partner in music, his spiritual confidant, his closest ally. That death changed Marvin. Over the years, other losses followed. Friends, family, mentors, and ISNers, and each one left a scar. These weren't just sad moments, they were life-altering. They made Marvin question how he wanted to spend the time he had left. And slowly, a thought started forming in his mind, one he didn't want to face. Is it time to let go? Still, he didn't make any quick moves. He kept praying, kept thinking, and kept pushing. But deep inside, something was shifting. He began to feel like God was leading him somewhere else, a place he couldn't quite understand yet. For a man who had always known his purpose, that feeling of confusion was terrifying. He was used to guiding others, not feeling lost himself. But destiny took an unexpected turn. And Marvin, no matter how strong he looked, knew that change was coming. The decision didn't come all at once. For years, Marvin kept showing up, smiling for the cameras, lifting spirits through music, preaching with power. But privately, he was searching for answers. He prayed for clarity, asking God to show him whether to stay or step back. And this is where it gets interesting. The signs were there, but he kept ignoring them. Fatigue wasn't just physical anymore, it was spiritual. The energy that once fueled him now faded faster. He started missing the fire he once felt when walking into the church, and slowly, a quiet voice in his heart started growing louder. You've done enough. Now it's time to let someone else lead. But how do you walk away from something you built with your own hands? That church wasn't just a building to Marvin, it was his life's work. He remembered every brick laid, every soul saved, every tearful testimony shared in that sanctuary. Letting go felt like abandoning a child. But he also knew that staying too long could mean giving less than his best. And for someone like Marvin Winans, someone who believed in excellence and purpose, that was unacceptable. He wanted to leave with grace, not collapse under the weight of burnout. Still, the pressure kept rising. People expected him to keep going. His name carried weight. His presence brought comfort. But here's the craziest part. The same people who praised him never noticed how tired he had become. They didn't see the nights he couldn't sleep or the mornings he didn't want to get out of bed. They didn't know he was preaching through pain, holding back tears while encouraging others to stay strong. Behind the powerful sermons and beautiful songs was a man who was quietly breaking. Even the music, the thing that once gave him joy, started feeling like a task. He wasn't inspired the way he used to be. The songs didn't pour out like they once did. And as someone who had always followed passion over pressure, Marvin knew this wasn't just exhaustion. This was a shift. Something was ending, and something else, something new, was calling. The final sign came after a particularly emotional Sunday sermon. He stood at the pulpit looking out at the congregation that had loved and followed him for decades. And for the first time in years, he felt disconnected. It wasn't that he didn't care. He cared deeply, but he realized that his heart wasn't fully there anymore. Let me tell you, that realization broke him. He went home that night, sat in silence, and cried. Not because he was weak, but because he knew what he had to do. The decision became clear. He had to step down, not because he was giving up, but because he wanted to honor the church by passing the torch. He wanted Perfecting Church to grow beyond him, to rise even higher under new leadership. It was a decision made out of love, not defeat. And when he finally told his congregation, the room went still. When Marvin made the announcement, it hit like a wave. You could feel the shock ripple through the congregation. People were in disbelief, not knowing how to process the words they were hearing. After all, this wasn't just any pastor. This was Marvin Winans, the man who had shaped their spiritual lives, who had been their guide through the toughest times. The thought of him walking away felt like the ground beneath them was shaking. And yet, this is where it gets interesting. Marvin wasn't just stepping down from the pulpit, he was making a profound declaration. His words were clear. This wasn't the end. It was just a new chapter. And though he wouldn't be preaching on Sundays anymore, he promised his congregation that he would never be far. He wasn't abandoning them. This wasn't an escape from responsibility. Instead, Marvin wanted to ensure that the church continued to thrive in ways that didn't rely solely on his presence. It was about giving someone else the chance to lead, giving someone else the opportunity to grow the ministry. But behind those words, there was more, a deeper truth. The craziest part, Marvin had been quietly preparing for this moment for years. In his heart, he knew that stepping down would be difficult, but it wasn't a sudden decision. He had wrestled with it for a long time. He asked himself, can I cut? Can I continue to give my people the best of me? Or is it time to step aside so they can experience even more? And through prayer, meditation, and hard personal reflection, he realized that the church, his family, and his music career were no longer in perfect alignment. Something needed to change, and he was the one who had to make that change. But here's the twist. Marvin's decision wasn't only about his health or the growing pressures of leadership. It was about his faith journey. For all his years of pastoring, of preaching, and of leading others, Marvin had always believed that God's plan for him was constant. But over time, he felt a pull in a different direction. Destiny took an unexpected turn, and Marvin, the pastor who had led so many to faith, found himself searching for the next step in his own spiritual path, it was a calling that couldn't be ignored. God was pushing him toward something new, something he couldn't quite define yet. He shared this with his congregation, how he had spent countless hours in prayer, asking God to reveal the next chapter. And though he wasn't sure exactly what lay ahead, Marvin knew that stepping down from the pulpit was the right choice. It was a difficult decision, one that no one else could understand unless they were in his shoes. After all, he wasn't just walking away from a career. He was stepping away from a life's calling. The weight of that decision didn't hit him all at once, but when it did, it hit hard. As Marvin stood there looking into the eyes of the people who had trusted him for so long, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew the transition would be emotional for both him and the congregation. But what kept him going through the hardest moments was knowing that this was God's plan, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. And even though he was leaving behind the life he had built, he was still holding on to something far more important: his faith and his purpose. This chapter was closing, but Marvin was far from done. The craziest part of all, what he would do next. The way he would continue to inspire, to uplift, and to teach was still unfolding. As the days went by, Marvin's decision to step down began to settle in, but the question on everyone's mind remained: what comes next for Marvin Winans? He wasn't retiring. He wasn't disappearing from the world he had shaped. No, Marvin made it clear that his purpose was still very much alive, just evolving. He promised that his ministry was not over, just transitioning into something new. And this is where it gets interesting. He wasn't leaving the church to fade into the background. He was making space to grow in new ways, to challenge himself in ways he hadn't before. This wasn't just a goodbye. It was a reboot. Marvin hinted at his next moves. One of the biggest things on the horizon was his return to music. For years, gospel music had been his life, his heartbeat. He spoke about how the passion for music had never really left him. It had just been dormant, waiting for the right time to come alive again. Music had always been his first love, and now, with the church in capable hands, he could pour himself into it fully. Fans speculated that Marvin might release new songs, possibly even collaborate with other artists in the gospel community. The excitement was palpable. His return to the stage was almost inevitable, and his voice, that voice that had given hope to so many, would be heard again. But beyond music, Marvin's heart seemed to pull him toward another endeavor: mentoring. He had a wealth of knowledge, experience, and wisdom that could benefit the younger generation of gospel artists. What makes this story different is that Marvin didn't just want to pass down his skills. He wanted to pass down his legacy of faith, resilience, and love for people. He spoke about mentoring young artists, helping them find their own voices, and guiding them through the ups and downs of the gospel music industry. For someone who had seen it all, like the highs, the lows, the glory, the struggles, Marvin was in a perfect position to shape the future of gospel music. And then there was the possibility of a book. Marvin had been through so much in his life, both in his ministry and his personal struggles. A book seemed like the perfect way to share the lessons he had learned along the way. He talked about how writing could offer insight into his journey, not just the triumphs, but the tough moments too. He wanted to show people that faith isn't just about the good times. It's about how you endure the bad, the painful, and the uncertain. His story could inspire so many people who were facing their own battles, especially those questioning their purpose or struggling with difficult decisions. For Marvin Winans, this wasn't a story of decline. It was a story of renewal. He had lived his life dedicated to serving others, but now it was time to serve in a different way. It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't one that everyone understood right away. But as he stood at the crossroads looking forward, he knew one thing for sure: stepping away from the church didn't mean he was stepping away from God. It just meant he was following a different calling. And That in itself is what makes Marvin Winans' story so powerful. It's a reminder that faith is not a fixed path. It's a journey that leads us in unexpected directions, even when we think we know exactly where we're headed. For Marvin, that journey continues, and whatever comes next will be shaped by the same faith, resilience, and passion that have guided him all along. With that, Marvin's influence and legacy will continue to inspire, just in new and unexpected ways. And that's a wrap on this incredible story. The full journey of Marvin Winans, the man who chose to evolve, step back, and embrace the next chapter with faith. What a story of inspiration, right? Now, this chapter has ended, but the next one, it's already in the making.